Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories. A big fall in US job creation. New payrolls plunge in the first month of the Trump presidency.
Our other headlines: buy local. Business leaders and trade unions gather in Canada to increase trade within the country following US tariff threats.
Greece's Prime Minister visits Santorini, declaring a state of emergency following hundreds of earthquakes.
And President Xi attends the opening ceremony of the Asian Winter Games and declares Harbin 2025 officially underway. The first employment data of the Trump presidency is out, showing a significant slowdown in job creation in the United States at the start of the year.
Non-farm payrolls in January rose by less than half the number in the previous month. That's all sectors except agriculture and government workers.
Our correspondent Mitch McCann is in New York. Mitch, just how significant is this?
It is significant. Good morning from the United States. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported this morning that 143,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy in January, which is less than what was predicted by analysts, by about 30,000 less. And it may be a sign of a softening job market. Now, for context, if we compare that figure to the average number of jobs created over previous years, in 2024 it was 186,000. 2023 it was 251,000. So you can see a steady decline there. And it's important to remember that it was only yesterday that we reported the number of American workers applying for unemployment benefits had risen for the week of the 1st of February by 11,000. So another couple of important headlines, I think, to factor in from this report this morning. And I guess it's more positive news than that headline number. The average hourly wages rose 0.5% from a month earlier, and unemployment for the month edged down only slightly to 4% from 4.1%. Now, these, as you mentioned, are the first job numbers released during Donald Trump's second term as U.S. president. And the White House put out a statement this morning, perhaps predictably, you could say. Today's job report reveals the Biden economy was far worse than anyone thought and underscores the necessity of President Trump's pro-growth policies. Perhaps a predictable statement there. Donald Trump blaming Joe Biden again, as he did during the campaign, for difficult times in the U.S. economy.
OK, well, look, another day, another Trump headline or two. Nearly all 10,000 staff at America's Foreign Aid Agency are being sent home. But there's now a legal challenge, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Now, I think this is proving to be one of the president's most controversial actions, I could say, since returning to the White House, halting funding and projects undertaken by America's Foreign Aid Agency, the USAID. Now, essentially, critics here are arguing that Donald Trump is attempting to dismantle the entire agency. It's been reported, as you mentioned, that staff levels could be slashed from around 10,000 people to fewer than 300 across the world. And it's been reported that arrangements are being made for employees of USAID to be flown home from their overseas assignments. Now, it's important to note that the White House says it's doing this because of widespread wasteful spending. Now, this morning, Donald Trump was on his phone again on Truth Social, and he posted that USAID is driving the radical left crazy. He says there is nothing they can do about it because in the way the money has been spent, so much of it fraudulently was totally unexplainable. Now, as always, there seems to be legal cases surrounding Donald Trump, and there is another one here. The largest government workers union in the US and an association of the Foreign Service have sued the Trump administration over this. They say in their lawsuit that Mr. Trump's decisions around USAID are unconstitutional and they're illegal actions, and they've created a global humanitarian crisis. It also argues, just finally, that Congress is the only entity that can lawfully dismantle the USAID.
Mitch, thank you for that. Our correspondent Mitch McCann in New York.
Buy local. That's the message as the Canada-US Economic Summit gets underway in Toronto. Hosted by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, business and labour leaders are looking to boost internal trade. It comes as Ottawa's relationship with Washington, its largest trading partner, has soured in the face of tariff threats from President Trump. Let's talk now to our correspondent, Dan Williams, who's in Toronto for us. So, Dan, what's the latest on these talks?
Yeah, this meeting, as you say, this summit getting underway here in Toronto this morning. And we've already heard from the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who kicked off the proceedings. He's saying today that we are at a moment, Canada's at a moment, we need to discuss, he says, not just how we get through the next month, but how can Canada thrive long term, talking about how there needs to be help towards businesses, but also Canadians. If these tariffs were to go into effect, there's no doubt that this will be devastating for the Canadian economy and, of course, will cost jobs. Trudeau going on that they need to discuss, sit down and discuss how best to navigate this potential more challenging relationship that they may well have with their long-term US economic partner, the United States. Now, it comes after Trudeau also met with various mayors of Canada as well. At that meeting, he said that it's an all-hands-on-deck Canada, Team Canada moment. And it seems like there are two key elements that will emerge from this meeting. The first one being how to build better trade within Canada, and then the second one, how to diversify exports as well. In terms of building trade within Canada, a key element here, the key focus is that there are so many regulations between provinces, licensing and the like, and all of those regulations now Canada are re-looking at those as to whether they can better allow trade to cross between provinces and the like. The Internal Trade Minister, Anita Anand, saying this week that those regulations are likely to fall within the next 30 days before these potential US tariffs come into effect, and also address these kind of various structural problems that exist within Canada, she says. But then, of course, there's also the diverse trade elements. There's already a pipeline for oil down towards the West Coast. Can there be, which obviously services Asia, can there be more of a focus towards Europe, building another pipeline across to the east? It, of course, would be a massive undertaking, but those are the kind of elements that are going to be discussed today at this summit.
And Dan, how is Canada reacting to the tariff pause? Is there really anything that Canada can do to mitigate US tariffs?
Well, there's certainly been a kind of a patriotic kind of reaction, if you like, among Canadians, a real focus towards buying Canada, and whether these tariffs fall away and the relations kind of go back to as they were, we're kind of still seeing, though, like that focus remaining, and obviously this tariff threat still very real. But make no mistake, just geographically and just with the size of the market, the US is without doubt losing, kind of getting these tariffs off the table is the #1 priority for this Canadian government. It remains the Canadians, the US is Canada's largest trading partner. Almost 2/3 of trade heads towards the US. It's a bilateral trade of about $900 billion. So replacing that will not be easy. And there's no doubt here that everyone is well aware of the huge economic impacts that exist if these tariffs were to go into effect. So replacing the markets and improving this kind of trade within Canada, these are all steps that are definitely being taken. Buy Canada, people checking the labels in shops to see whether the products are indeed made in Canada. All of these are elements trying to support the various networks here. But there's no doubt that having these tariffs on Canadian goods going to the US will cause huge economic pain here, and that really still hangs over Canada while this pause in tariffs exists.
All right, Dan Williams, our correspondent in Toronto. Many thanks.
Well, following Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, Japan's Prime Minister is due to become the second international leader to visit the White House since President Trump's return.
Shigeru Ishiba's visit comes after Trump threatened tariffs against his North American neighbours, Canada and Mexico, while imposing 10% levies on Chinese goods. Trade and defence issues are expected to dominate the talks. Chris Southworth is Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom.
Let's be clear, the US is breaking the global trade rules. We have to be clear about that. The big question actually is what the rest of the world do, or the international community do about it. And China is obviously in the hot seat at the moment, but also a whole range of other countries are also being impacted here, whether it's Canada, Mexico, EU is in the frame, India's in the frame, UK's in the frame. We've all been named, all part of the conversation.
Just to pick up on that point about the WTO, the UK, of course, a strategic partner. What role can it actually play? What kind of teeth does it have to address trade disputes?
Without the WTO, the world is chaos. It's just a total free-for-all. It's the one place, the one international body that's responsible for keeping the system structured, orderly, so we all know what to do. It's really, really important. That's the place to come to in order to make sure that trade works for everybody, and it really matters for almost everybody in the world. The US, of course, is a big domestic economy as well, so it's big enough to do what it wants to do in many ways, but it's not big enough anymore. It doesn't have the market power to dismantle trade. It can be disruptive, but it can't dismantle the trading system, and that's really important in terms of the countries that are active in the World Trade Organization community to make sure that the trading system continues to work for everybody, progress is not derailed, and also don't forget Trump is coming in this time into a world that's much better organized since the last time. There are completely different power players, different power brokers, and all of them are working much more intensively than people think in terms of preparation and how to deal with the issues that they're facing.
And focusing on this part of the world, if US tariffs are imposed, especially on the European Union, what kind of impact would that have on UK businesses? The UK, of course, outside the EU, and if it is exempt from tariffs, could that be a really good thing for British firms? Could they benefit from that? And does the UK have any leverage now?
Well, nobody wins from a trade war, a tariff war. Let's be really clear about that. If the US imposed tariffs on Europe, that's 40% of our trade is with Europe. Of course, it will impact the UK. Where the UK is interesting is in the sense that it's not part of the big power blocks anymore, whether it's the EU or anywhere else. There's no reason at all why the UK and US should be in a tariff war. We have a lot of common ground. We're big services economies, so tariffs aren't really important to our economies in the grandest sense. There's a lot of opportunity, and what we're trying to say is let's focus on the big economic opportunities. Let's not get into a tariff war. That doesn't make sense to anybody, and we'll all get damaged if we do. And if you look at it from a US perspective, a tariff war will hurt the US. It will hurt consumers. It will hurt US businesses. The poorest will get hit the hardest, and small businesses will also get hit the hardest. I think what's interesting about a lot of this is the poorest are much of Trump's voter base. How much tolerance and patience they have for a tariff war will be really interesting to watch.
China's Vice Premier Jiang Guoqing will attend a major artificial intelligence summit in Paris next week. World leaders will discuss the rapid development of AI, from its role in the workplace to global governance. China says it wants to reach consensus on regulating the technology and build agreements between Xi Jinping and Emmanuel Macron. China's DeepSeek recently rattled the global markets after launching its own low-cost AI model.
Japan's SoftBank is reportedly close to finalizing a $40 billion investment in America's OpenAI as part of a new funding round. The investment would value the Microsoft-backed generative AI startup at $260 billion. The owner of ChatGPT is also in talks with other investors for additional funding.
Volkswagen has teased the release of an entry-level electric vehicle priced at $21,000. Details are due for public release next month, and it's slated to become the German company's most affordable EV. VW is pitting it against competing brands from China and other markets. Production of the new model is expected to begin in 2027.
Meanwhile, the carmaker SEAT has warned jobs in Spain may be at risk if EU tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles can't be reversed. The Volkswagen-owned firm says the additional 20% tariff imposed by Brussels last year is making sales of its Cupra model unsustainable. The group says the vehicle, which is designed in Spain but made in China, may be cut from its lineup, putting 1,500 jobs at risk.
India has cut the cost of borrowing for the first time in nearly 5 years. Interest rates have been lowered by 25 basis points to 6.25% in the hope of boosting a rather sluggish economy. The central bank also flagged global market volatility, adverse weather, and what it called uncertain trade policies.
House prices in the UK have risen to a new record high. The cost of the average home rose 0.7% last month to just over $370,000. That's above what analysts had expected. Home sellers report a jump in demand ahead of tax changes that come into effect in April.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the state of emergency. The Prime Minister of Greece visits Santorini as the holiday island is rocked by hundreds of tremors.
Chinese paper cutting, known as jianzhe, is thought to have originated during the 6th century CE. However, some believe that its history could be traced back further. Usually the artworks are made of red paper, as the colour red is associated with festivities and luck in Chinese culture. Cut paper artwork is used as a way of decorating doors and windows during festivals such as Chinese New Year and weddings, symbolising good wishes and happiness. The common tools used in Chinese paper cutting are scissors or an engraving knife. Yin and Yang are the two main techniques used in paper cutting. Yin refers to the process of cutting out a defined shape, whereas Yang refers to cutting out the negative space around that shape. Works are mainly divided into southern and northern styles. The southern style utilises fine and precise cuts to create intricate lace-like patterns, showcasing themes from nature such as plants and animals. The northern style is known for its exaggerated shapes and vigorous designs, emphasising strong lines, symmetry and contrast, and often features themes from Chinese mythology and historical figures. Today, paper cutting is one of the most popular folk arts in China.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The Greek Prime Minister has urged the public to stay calm after declaring a state of emergency on Santorini.
More tremors have been reported as Kyriakos Mitsotakis visited the island. Hundreds of small earthquakes have struck over the past week. The army has now been deployed and thousands of residents and tourists have fled. Let's talk to our correspondent Evangelos Sipsas in Athens. Evangelo, what are you hearing? What's the latest?
Well, what we know right now is that the tremors continue to take place on Santorini and the nearby islands of Anafi, Ios, and Amorgos. Just in the past few hours, we experienced more than 50 quakes that were quite strong, to say. The Greek Prime Minister also visited the island. He declared a state of emergency, saying that, unfortunately, from what scientists have warned him, saying that the large quake or the largest quake has yet to come. And that's what on everybody's mind at the moment. Everybody's concerned if there's going to be a larger earthquake and when it's going to take place and how strong that might be. But people on the island are not waiting until that happens. So far, we know that 60% of the total population of Santorini has fled to nearby islands or here in Athens finding a refuge. Most of the people are expected to leave as well as the days go by. There's extra ferries, but also extra flights coming in from Athens to be able to accommodate people that want to leave. On the island at the given moment, there is the Civil Protection Ministry along with rescue teams. People are on the ground waiting for that big quake that might happen. The Prime Minister, as I mentioned earlier, was there earlier today. He did walk around to see if there's any damages, what things look like on the ground. And what he pointed out many times today was that #1 priority for him and his government is to protect the people if something bigger happens. Let's have a listen.
My job is to always err on the side of caution, and that is why we have mobilized, the state infrastructure in the eventuality of a bigger earthquake. We're constantly listening to the experts, and we will take our decisions based on their expert advice.
And that's what is going on the island. The experts' advice right now, as the Prime Minister is saying, is that something bigger might happen, as the quakes so far that have struck the island were not the ones that are the main ones.
Evangelo, Santorini, of course, known the world over for its beauty, for its tourism. What does all of this mean for that tourism industry?
Millions of people flock to Santorini every year to visit the picturesque island with the beautiful sunsets. And tourism is actually what the island relies on. 90% of the total economy of the island relies on tourism. But now, with these quakes and this uncertainty taking place, a lot of businesses are actually shutting down. A lot of the business owners are leaving themselves. And a lot of people who have already scheduled holidays on the island are canceling, and that is quite significant right now for the island, because it could have a toll in the upcoming summer season, because scientists do warn that if a large quake happens, then things might get bigger, might get calmer, but of course people will be afraid to come. But if that big quake does not happen, then numerous of small ones are going to take place in a period of a month or 2 months. So of course people who are thinking to go to Santorini will be concerned that they don't want to be on a picturesque island enjoying their holidays while the earth below them is shaking. And that's why the business owners right now are speaking with the Greek Prime Minister, saying that if that does indeed happen, then we need subsidies by the government to be able to support our local economy.
Evangelo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Athens.
The International Criminal Court has condemned an executive order signed by President Trump imposing sanctions on its staff. The court added it would continue providing justice to millions around the world and called on its members to stand united. Trump has ordered asset freezes and travel bans against the ICC. He said the court had carried out baseless investigations targeting the US and its ally Israel.
Well, Israel has welcomed President Trump's sanctions against the International Criminal Court. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv.
It has been welcomed, we have to say, and not only by the coalition members, also but by the opposition. There's a clear uneasy feeling in Israel regarding the ICC and the way that it treats Israel. Of course, feelings that have only grown much stronger after the ICC published its order a few months ago to carry out this arrest warrants against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And one of the aims Israel believes of this move by Donald Trump is to actually put pressure on the ICC to remove these arrest warrants, and maybe if the ICC really does that, the U.S. will eventually perhaps ease its sanctions on the ICC. It's a move that has been welcomed for years. The ICC, a bit like the United Nations Human Rights Council, have been described here in Israel as very anti-Israeli bodies. Therefore, this latest move by the Trump administration clearly welcomed here in Israel.
And there are concerns over what this might mean for the next hostage releases.
True. The hostage release, the next one, Jamie, is expected to happen tomorrow. And the names are on paper. They should be published actually right now. It's 4 p.m. local time. That is 2 p.m. GMT. It has so far not happened. We have to say that it never really happened at this time. In the first stage, some 3 weeks ago, the names were actually published only in the morning of the release. Then further on, they were actually published at an earlier time. Now, the names have not been published. Nothing has been coming out of Gaza suggesting that there's any change in the hostage release. Nothing to suggest that any delay will happen. But there is concern. There is concern among families. There is concern among the supporters that the latest moves by Donald Trump, suggesting that Gaza should be cleared out of its Palestinian residents, may bring some kind of a change from Hamas. We've not heard anything coming out of Gaza. We've not heard anything coming out of the mediators as well. Not from Qatar, not from Egypt. And we have to say, Hamas has an interest of allowing this process to move forward, simply because even at this first stage, for every Israeli released from Gaza, Hamas is getting quite a substantial number of prisoners. Hamas also has its own obligations towards the mediators, towards Qatar, towards Egypt. And yet, having said all that, there's a clear concern here in Israel that the last week in Washington, which was seen all over Israel as a very pro-Israeli week, could have its effect on the hostage release. Will it happen or not? We don't have a lot of time until we'll find out. Tomorrow, at this time, 3 more hostages should be back in Israel. Will it really happen? 24 hours from now, we will know.
Europe's far-right parties are meeting in Madrid, with Gaza expected to be a key topic. The Patriots for Europe group includes Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban and France's Marine Le Pen. They're being hosted by the leader of Spain's Vox party, Santiago Abascal. It comes as the Trump administration revealed a plan to take over Gaza. Israel suggested European countries that have recognized Palestinian statehood should take in Gazans who want to leave voluntarily.
The United Nations has warned the risk of violence spreading from the Democratic Republic of Congo into neighboring countries has never been higher. Volker Turk has called for help to halt the escalating crisis. Rwanda-backed M23 rebels took control of the DRC city of Goma in January. The UN agency says civilians are suffering, with 500,000 people now displaced.
Investigators in Sweden are looking into whether the deadly shooting at an adult education centre on Tuesday was a targeted attack. 10 people were killed in the worst mass shooting in the country's history.
The gunman, a former student who then took his own life during the attack, legally owned a number of firearms. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
The Risberska school campus was a place of learning, a fresh start for many adults looking to learn a new skill. Now, it's the scene of Sweden's deadliest mass shooting.
She was one of the kind. She always laughed at silly things, and we laughed.
And her laughed.
Yeah, you know, when we work, we have been working with her in the nursing home.
That is how friends remember Camilla, an immigrant mother who was taking classes to become a nursing assistant, but was fatally shot.
A 52-year mother, 3 children, 1 husband.
Also among the dead is 29-year-old Salim Iskev, who fled war-torn Syria in 2015, hoping for a better future in Sweden. Investigators are now examining whether this was an hate-motivated attack. Many of the students at this campus are immigrants who were taking Swedish language classes and vocational courses. Multiple others remain hospitalized with gunshot wounds in serious but stable conditions. The attack has left many in this community in shock.
Yeah, it was just lucky.
Yeah.
That I left before that happened, but still sad because so many lives, lost their lives. So.
The shooter, a 35-year-old man who had been unemployed for over a decade, was found dead at the scene after police say he shot himself. Investigators are now reviewing his background and past statements after reports surfaced that he held anti-immigrant views.
It's painful to think, everything that happened.
The government says it will seek to tighten gun laws in the wake of the country's deadliest mass shooting. The attack has also raised questions about whether security at Sweden's schools needs to be better. But for those in Örebro, there are many more questions they need answers to. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Örebro, Sweden.
And you're watching CGTN. Still ahead, China's President Xi Jinping officially opens the Asian Winter Games in Harbin.
Tradition, trade and culture have connected Europe and China for hundreds of years.
In the 18th century, a small number of products escaped from China and lit a touch paper in the West of excitement.
In this special series, we'll uncover the intertwined social and cultural histories of Europe and China, from the ancient Silk Road to the modern era.
Art is traveling as a silent ambassador to spread the word about culture and civilization.
It's amazingly impressive because they were such incredibly talented artists.
When you talk about silk, with a value of 3 or 4 garments, you could buy a palace.
We'll be seeking out the European spaces where traces of China lie hidden in plain sight.
Wow! This is the Chinese room, and it's definitely one of my favorites within the house.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Paul Barber. Our top stories: a big fall in United States job creation, new payrolls plunge in the first month of the Trump presidency.
Business leaders and trade unions gather in Canada to increase trade within the country following US tariff threats.
And Greece's Prime Minister visits Santorini, declaring a state of emergency following hundreds of earthquakes.
China's president has officially opened the Asian Winter Games. Xi Jinping is attending the opening ceremony in the host city of Harbin.
China's delegation were led in by 2 flag bearers, the speed skater Ning Zhongyang and freestyle skier Lu Mengting. Athletes from 34 countries are competing in ice and snow events. Well, our correspondent Siobhan McCall is following the story. What can we expect then?
Well, Jamie, after a spectacular opening ceremony that really paid tribute to Harbin's ice and snow reputation, international reputation there's a lot of excitement with these games now officially open. As you mentioned, President Xi officially opened the games, but before that, he held a welcoming banquet for some international dignitaries. And at that, he said that Harbin was ready to deliver a sporting gala for the world. And he also spoke about China's passion for ice and snow sports. It's interesting because last time Harbin held this competition was in 1996. There were 450 athletes taking part. This time it is a record. It's close to 1,300. Well, one of the dignitaries that attended that banquet with President Xi was Thomas Bach. And ahead of the opening ceremony, he took part in a recognition ceremony. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because it was with China Media Group, a CMG. And there was actually a historic moment in that ceremony. And it's because he passed on the broadcast rights to Milan 2026, the next Winter Olympics. And he confirmed that CMG would make history by producing the international broadcast signal for 2 events, the figure skating and the short track speed skating at the Winter Olympics. So it's the first time they've taken on this responsibility. So Thomas Bach also spoke about Beijing 2022. That was the last Winter Olympics, and how he wanted to see athletes at the Asian Games and also at that Milan Games take advantage of that legacy. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
I want to qualify for Olympic Winter Games, and this is how it should be, that as many athletes in as many countries as possible are benefiting from this great legacy of Beijing 2022.
So, Siobhan, it's all about to kick off. When will we see the first medals awarded?
Well, Paul, the good news is we don't have long to wait for the first medal. That will be on Saturday, so tomorrow. And China is actually in the event that we think will be the first gold medal awarded, which is the mixed 200 metres relay final in the speed skating. China's got 3 gold medalists from the Beijing 2022 Games in that squad. There's 4 teams in that final: South Korea, Japan and Kazakhstan, as well as China. So we'll have to see how that goes. But they don't win gold in that, well, there's plenty more golds on offer, 64 in total across the competition. Japan, China and South Korea, sort of the powerhouses in the Asian Winter Games. But there are some new teams as well who'll be hoping to make a good impression and grab at least one of those medals. One of those teams is Saudi Arabia, who's actually the host of the next Asian Winter Games in 2029. But for now, let's focus on this one and the events getting underway. Thanks.
Siobhan, thanks so much. Siobhan McCall.
Well, our correspondent Wan Hongjia has been checking out the sportswear and the tech being used at this Winter Games and the commercial opportunities and growth that the event generates.
With temperatures set to drop to anywhere between -20 and -40 degrees, these outfits will be tasked with keeping everyone warm in extreme conditions. Professor Yang and her team have designed these cutting-edge pieces of sportswear and accessories for 7 key groups at the 2025 Asian Winter Games in Harbin. Some will be for torchbearers, while other garments have been designed for volunteers.
The inner layer is made from graphene, which is known for its ability to maintain temperature, locking warmth and suppress bacteria.
The outer layer features fluorine-free waterproof down technology, which prevents melted ice and snow from soaking in when the wearer enters a warmer environment.
We also expanded the hat in both depth and width to accommodate users who may need to wear a helmet underneath. This garment is intended not just for regular skiers, but for our volunteers as well.
Over 330 million Chinese people are now into winter sports. How to understand that figure? Let's say that the sales of snow gear and garments went from less than 5 billion yuan in 2015 to about 22 billion yuan in 2023. That's equivalent to more than $3 billion. Winter sports are truly taking off, and China is really catching the snowstorm.
Most of these technologies have already been incorporated into our products. From the winter of 2024 to the spring of 2025, winter sports have significantly boosted orders, contributing to a roughly 15% growth in business.
Liu says both order volume and value have seen substantial increases, and consumers can put on the Asian Winter Games selections soon in the stores across China. Wan Hongjia, CGTN, Beijing.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Traces of China. From all the team in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.